Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Does anyone know the answer to this question up here? I've had this clue up for 10 minutes.
Solar panels.
No, not heat pumps, not solar panels. Oh, come on.
Radio?
What?
Radio? Radio.
Nope. Really? There isn't a sustainability person in the room that knows this?
Insulation windows.
Battery?
Air sealer.
There are some rules in this world that make me kind of angry. Tonight I'm going to talk about decarbonization. I'll introduce myself in a second, but I will say my name is Andy Patey and I appreciate the crowd here tonight. I have tried to do this talk across the country for a while, but people didn't like the original title that I had for it, which was No Electrification Without Representation. So that got the people in Boston particularly unhappy. A few things I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to get introductions of me, and I want to find out who you are. I'm going to do some definitions, some history. I'm going to do lessons on environmentalism and psychology because 75% of my work is psychology. I'm going to talk about the intersection of building science, financing, and decisions. I'm going to talk about lessons learned and lessons to learn, and hopefully I'm going to try to do some things that are funny. I have people in the audience that have known me a very long time, and they know I'm not really funny. But the survey in calisthenics I kind of put together into one. How many people in the room stand up if you're energy efficiency program or staff people? One, okay. Two. Builders, contractors? Builders. Field personnel? People that actually get their hands dirty and fix things? Thank you. You can be more than one thing, it's okay. Who works for the government? Come on, government people, stand up. Technically, come on, Jim. Technically, you're government.
I work for a college.
Oh, yeah, okay.
We all work.
Utility? Nonprofit. Okay. Product rep or supplier? There's a few of those. Engineers, architects? Okay. We won't yell at you today. You can put your hand up more than halfway. Students, university people. One, two. How many people here served in the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines? Raise your hand. None.
Boy Scouts.
That has never happened. Anyone work for a bank or a lender? What else? What?
I don't know where you put like solar companies in there necessarily. For owner developer.
You're a contractor.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Wow. Doesn't like
All
to be
these
pinned
years
down.
now we know what you do.
Others?
Consultant.
Yeah?
Consultant.
Consultant. Okay.
Economist.
Economist? Wow. So that's me, and I'm really happy in that picture because I've got a Guinness in my hand, but I'm also less than 20 minutes from the place in Ireland where my grandmother and my grandfather were born, separate towns. Besides being an original board member and volunteer at Green Home NYC, I have done over 2,000 ASHRAE Level 2 energy audits. Those are very complex things. I did a lot of Sandy recovery and resilience stuff after Sandy, fixed a lot of buildings, construction managed a lot of stuff. I worked for a bank for 10 years. So I'm one of those strange people in the sustainability field that understands financing, and I'm one of the few people in the financing world that understands sustainability. I work for private and nonprofit engineering firms. I have worked for the government, and currently I'm an consultant, and I work primarily for multifamily buildings, low-income multifamily buildings, which I'm sorry I look a little schleppy today, but I was in Dover, New Jersey at 7 a.m. this morning looking at housing authority buildings, so that's all I could do. And I want to quote this Native American proverb, we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And I kind of lived by that. I was scared to death in the 70s by a book that described how terrible things were going to be in the future. Gas crisis, high prices, overpopulation, and everything that this book called Mankind at the Turning Point predicted was absolutely true, on the button, and it scared the crap out of me, which is why I'm an environmentalist today. And I see these signs in my neighborhood that say this is going to be sea level in 2050, so is it going to look like that? I don't know. Some ways for us to decarbonize. We're all individuals, we can fix stuff. How many environmentalists in the room? Please raise your hand. If you're an environmentalist, stand up, please. Oh, this is so hard to do calisthenics.
Andy,
Yeah.
I'm not, because environmentalists are now NIMBYs, and I'm a GIMBY.
Okay, well, remain standing, please. How many of you compost food waste? Remain standing if you do. Oh, you're very good. Okay. So most people don't. That's my little community garden just a few blocks from you can sit down now. Calisthenics are open. That's my little community garden, and that's a compost bin that I invented all by myself. It's a throwaway, it's like an outdoor garbage can that I didn't put the bottom on, and I drilled holes in it. But if you look at, if it was a country, food waste would be the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases on the earth, behind only China and the United States. This is a new book that came out this year. That number freaked me out, and I'm really glad that I compost. I also recycle, and I'm anal retentive about recycling because someone from sanitation at a green home meeting a few years ago said, you can't recycle anything more than 50%. And most people should be able to do 75%. So for a year I weighed every single thing in my house as I threw it out. That's not the light. Okay, oops, that went too fast. How do I back up? So I weighed the paper and the metal and glass and the compost and the garbage. The thing was, I'm a former I still take pictures, but I had thousands and thousands and thousands of photographs, and they can't be recycled, and I didn't know of a resource recovery plant that would burn them. So 18.7% of all of my garbage waste in 1 year was photographs that I threw away. But other than that, I recycled, I had less than 20% of my throwaways as garbage. So I'm pretty anal retentive about it, but still I have my youngest niece and my oldest friends in the world who are both environmentalists, and they throw out the paper toilet roll thing that's 100% recyclable, and it drives me nuts. Who said this?
Former president?
I'm sorry?
A former president?
Just tell me who it is.
James Earl Carter.
Jimmy Carter said this. Congratulations, Charlie, for getting the right answer. You win a 1950s buck knife.
Whoa. It's not a graphic knife.
No, you can carry it. What happened? What did we lose? Okay. Jimmy Carter did this in his speech that was 47 years ago this Thursday. It was called The Moral Equivalent of War, and it was one of the greatest speeches ever because he outlined how wasteful we are as Americans and how important efficiency is. And you can look up this speech. It's fabulous. It's known by us old coots as the Meow speech, the moral equivalent of war. And Jimmy Carter started the Department of Energy. So all of the money that goes into energy and all the tax credits and everything like that, we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for him. So anybody that tells you he wasn't a good president, he was a great president. So why do I want to talk about efficiency tonight? Well, because over half of it is do-it-yourself. It's very simple, it's safe, it's inexpensive. you have to take what the manufacturers and the contractors tell you with a little bit of plus and minus. You really have to do your homework, research good sources and what results people have, because no one sells something ahead of their product. So if they're a foam insulation installer and they're doing energy audits, strangely their audit is going to come back that foam is the best thing to do in the building. And efficiency helps question authority, because I don't hear efficiency enough these days, and it kind of makes me angry. Yep, Mickey and Goofy explore energy conservation. This was a giveaway from the Department of Energy in the 80s. And that was the back page that talked about supply and demand. And if you wanted to order extra copies of it, you could. You can't order them anymore. I saw them on eBay yesterday for $4. But who manufactured them for the Department of Energy? That would be Exxon. And the oil and gas industries get an awful lot of money for that. Efficiency curbs catastrophic waste. And there's huge catastrophic waste everywhere. I moved into New York City in 1979. I went to the first meeting of the Metropolitan Solar Energy Society. I walked up to the president of the Metropolitan Solar Energy Society. I'm going to show you his picture in a minute. His name was Bill Bobenhausen. He's like, "You're new here, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to put solar on buildings in New York." And he said to me, "Wouldn't it be smarter if we made the buildings more efficient first so that solar would pick up more of the load?" I was like, who is this genius? I have never heard anything that smart. So Bill became a really good friend of mine and mentor. But over the years, I've had very different mentors. That's Bill up in the corner. That's my pal Charlie Komanoff, who happens to be here tonight, and he doesn't realize how much he mentored me at a very young age. My mom and dad, my pal Gary Nelson and John Tooley, my pal Stephen Winter. Yes, George Harrison was very important in my life, and so was Joe Stiebrick, and the former third baseman from the New York Yankees, Greg Nettles. So there's people in your life that show you the way, that are very important to you. I just came back from a national conference, and we did an evening session for 90 minutes talking about mentors and mentees. And if you don't have a mentor, you need 4 more. And you shouldn't call them mentors, you should call them board of directors. And you should have a few, because you all need guidance. I don't care how old or young you are. These are my mentees, or just some of them. And yes, guys, I don't like mentoring guys because you're kind of stupid and it's really hard to get through your thick heads. But women are actually more efficient, and they ask a question first and then they walk away with the answer you give them, and then they ask you later in the day about highlighting stuff. So these are just some of my mentees, and a good number of them have much more successful jobs than I have today. That's a big win for me. When I started in the business, I didn't know crap. And literally, I ran the hotline for the New York City Mayor's office, the energy hotline for the Mayor's office under Ed Koch. And the head of the office said to me, if you don't know, if somebody calls up and you don't know something, ask Charlie Komanoff, he knows everything. And 150 years ago, I said to Charlie, who are you? What do you do? And he said, I'm an energy genius. And I have the Rolodex page that says Charlie Komanoff, energy genius, and I showed it to him earlier this year. So I know this looks incredibly rich and fabulous, but this is the house I grew up in, and it's only 1,500 square feet. But it was incredibly wasteful, and those of you that are in the energy business would say, well, yeah, this has a tuck-under thing, and it has crappy windows, and you know, you need to put more insulation, and it's got a tuck-under garage, so that all has to be insulated. And I didn't know what to do in the house. Then in 1982, these 2 guys from Canada wrote a story that was in New Shelter magazine. And they said that they had done research in hundreds of Canadian homes and found out that in the attic of every Canadian home, there were holes. Because if someone put a 1-inch wire up into the attic, they cut a 2-inch hole. If they had a 2-inch pipe, they cut a 4-inch hole. So I went up into my dad's attic, my dad and mom's attic, And I sealed the attic. And I air sealed the attic, and my Ronald Reagan Republican father, his gas bill went down 40%. It's very simple to do that by air sealing the attic. And the gas company accused him of stealing gas from them, which warmed my soul. 10 years later, my pal Michael Blasnick was working in Philadelphia, and he actually did a 7-page book for owners of Philadelphia row houses on how to insulate their roofs. And it made it very simple. And he had learned all of the techniques from the best people. He was 20 years old when he did this. He's the head of Nest for Google now, and if you have a Google thermostat, he knows the temperature in your house. But houses leak and buildings leak. These are infrared pictures. When you see red, it's leaking. That's a dumbwaiter shaft. That's a vent at the top of a dumbwaiter shaft. Those are ventilation fans in an electrically heated building. Note electrically heated building. That's energy dumping out of everywhere. That's a vent on the top of an 11,000 unit building. And it had these vents at the top of every building, of every stairwell. It had 2 of them. And we found this, the #1 way to save energy in these buildings was to take one of those vents and connect it to the other one and put an air-to-air heat exchanger on it. And it was the least expensive and the most cost-effective. Ever seen these before?
Yes.
These are called Hollywood lights. And I don't wear makeup, but my friends that wear makeup say it literally melts the makeup off your face. And I found these lights in a master metered low-income building in Philadelphia. It's like you would put all of those lights in. I found this light in a master metered building in Washington, D.C. And please note it said, warning, risk of fire. Use 60-watt lamp max. And note that this is 100. But not just 1, 2. This happens all the time. When I take an owner to one of his buildings and have a meeting with them at 9 o'clock in the morning, I show up at the building at 8 with a clipboard, and the tenants come out and they tell me what's wrong in the building because I'm obviously an inspector of some kind. And when the owner shows up, I say on a cold day, count the open windows. And he says, yeah, my stupid tenants are opening the windows. I'm like, no, the stupid owner doesn't know how to control the boiler. These boilers, these were installed throughout the 80s by HPD, HUD, the State Division of Housing, and they are the least efficient boilers manufactured in America, but they are cheap. And they will put them in without the ability to have night setback, because the night setback control cost an extra $100. I looked at thousands of buildings, and this is what single family, this is, unfortunately this graph is kind of eaten by this, but that's 5, 10, 15, 20. This is all in BTUs per square foot per heating degree day. That evens everybody out wherever they are. And single family homes are pretty efficient because people don't live there that often, or they live there but they turn the heat back when they're gone. Low income single family use a lot more because people are working more shifts. There's more family members there. Sometimes grandma and grandpa and the kids work, so there's no setback. I look at middle-income multifamily buildings across New York State, and they use about the same amount of energy to use for heat as hot water, because there's central hot water systems, and they typically use more energy. But in the early 90s, I found these buildings that were using 10 times more energy than the average home in America, and they were relatively new rehabs constructed by various government entities and various architects and engineers in New York City. And the reason behind it is that they use so much energy is they had done what's called value engineering. And that means taking shit out. So they put radiators without radiator valves, because radiator valves are expensive. They put in cheap boilers with no night setback, and it got worse and worse. Low-income buildings across New York State, multifamily are doing a bit better now, but in the year 2000, for the same amount of money that these were built, Les Bluestone built the first Energy Star multifamily buildings in New York City, and he said, so they use about the same amount of energy as a normal household. He said they cost him $1.36 more per square foot to build. He was the first presenter we had at Greenhome NYC. So this is the kind of thing, typically if you go to an owner and you look at 10 of their buildings, one of their buildings is using 1 BTU per square foot and the other is using 7. So typically there's a 7-to-1 number all over the place. So find the pigs and fix them. When I'm trying to decarbonize, I'm trying to get people to do stuff that's intelligent. And for instance, insulating a flat roof. This is a flat roof of a co-op, and if you look for a second, this is very common from the late 30s to the mid 40s. They put these vents in the side of attic cavities, roof cavities, flat roof cavities, to vent the moisture out of them, not thinking that they were also venting all of the heat out of the building. This is a bad thing. So this co-op spent $1.1 million to put insulation on the roof surface. Stay with this for a minute. This was certified and designed by an architect. I lied. I'm going to pick on architects a little bit. So they put a whole new surface on the roof, 4 inches of rigid and all of these beautiful walkways. But they didn't remove these turbine vents, which are sucking the air out of the roof cavity. And in fact, they added a couple of extra ones. So what this is a renewable energy roof cavity depressurization system that doesn't save any energy, increases the energy use in the building, and costs $1.1 million. Every day I see this stuff. So I'm trying to decarbonize. And I've got this lovely building in the Bronx. I've got this lovely building on the Hudson River, just south of Poughkeepsie. I've got this lovely building in Brooklyn that has 300 units, 300 or 400 units, 5 buildings. So I try to do the decarbonization thing. So in the building on the Hudson, an energy auditor showed up. He was pretty good. He knew his stuff, but he worked for a foam company. Stay with this for a minute. So it was fine. He really, really did a good scope of work in the building. The attic was completely leaky. And every time, remember I was saying air seal the attic? If you go up in the attic to anybody's house, you'll see a pipe like this. And whenever you see this black stuff, that's air that's been flying out of there for years. So look for the black on the pink, lift the pink up, you'll find a hole, caulk and seal it, put it back. And that's how to air seal an attic. There's some fire rated things that you have to do that are a little different, but this is what their attic looked like. Their attic was completely connected to the rest of their house, so the house was completely leaking all of its heat through the attic. The results of the audit were half of the house was heated with hydronic, a boiler, and the other half was heated with strip electric. Really dumb idea, but the building was designed by the previous owner. They had a $10,000 electric bill and a $10,000 oil bill per year. The house is used year-round. The attic was completely connected to the house. It was the most cost-effective thing to air seal the attic. The next most cost-effective thing was to do solar because there was a huge electric load in the building and there's a 40% tax credit. So that had a really fast payback. Solar was very cost-effective. The heat pump system for the building cost $43,000. What? And the rebate and 2,000 federal tax credit, it's like, huh? Well, the government's been telling us for years to do heat pumps. Guess what? The heat pump industry is jacking up the price.
Yeah.
Weird, huh? But the proposal called for keeping the oil and the electric strip in case the other stuff went down. Let me explain something to you. If the electricity goes down, the boiler won't work.
That's right.
I asked the contractor to specify taking the existing walls and blowing them with cellulose insulation, which would take old fiberglass and squish it a little bit, but make it tighter and operate more efficiently. And he said, no, NYSERDA won't let us do that. I called up NYSERDA the next day. That is not correct. But he did put in his proposal to tear out all of the interior sheetrock in the building, remove all of the fiberglass in it, and foam all the walls at a cost of $76,000. It did have a payback of 47 years, so the owner decided not to do it. This is a brownstone. This is a series of brownstones in the Bronx. In the South Bronx, this is the address. They're the ones that are darker than the rest are tied together into a condo. So each one of the apartments, each one of the buildings has 3 apartments in it. And we looked at them and we're like, the boiler's about to die, the people pay their own electric bill, we can give them each a heat pump, we can put a heat pump in the basement, the utilities were going to give us a ton of money, they were low-income buildings so they'd get a ton of other money. They got all of this other stuff that we tied together, and we went to these were the old boilers in the building that were falling apart. And I spoke with the condo board, and we were going to like insulate the rear wall, re-insulate the front wall, insulate the roof, so literally the load would be down to nothing. You know what they said to us? We want windows. That's what everybody says. I went to a housing authority in in Morris Plains, New Jersey today, and we had an entire scope of work, and the executive director of the housing authority said, you know, we want windows. I'm like, you know, windows will only save 2%. She's like, no, I read in the paper, they say 40% on TV. That's what's called advertising. So this is a 300-unit, 5-building complex in downtown Brooklyn. And they have huge steam boilers. And they have steam heat. And we had a scope of work to like thermostatic radiator valves and do a whole bunch of stuff and fix the ventilation system and do a bunch of stuff that would really cut their energy use by 40%. And the representative consultant who was working for the state of New York said to me, could you do heat pumps here? I'm like, I don't think I want to put that many heat pumps on the side of a wall. And they said, could you do geothermal? And I said, well, it's a steam system, so I could drill down to magma, and we could do geothermal. And this person said to me, could you give me a proposal to do that? One of our elected officials was on WNYC the other day, and she is a sponsor of a major piece of legislation, and she told me over the radio that plumbers are fine with heat pumps because geothermal heat pumps deliver steam and hot water to apartments. This is somebody that doesn't understand geothermal. Okay. There are some institutional barriers to doing heat pumps in large rent-stabilized buildings because rental units don't pay for heat, domestic hot water. Some don't pay for electricity. And the electrical systems can't provide enough electricity. I looked at changing my electrical system in my house to change my stove, $3,000 for the stove and changing the electric. Can't afford that, sorry. The contractors throughout New York City and New York State and across the United States tell me the biggest problem in getting service into a building is the utilities. They're completely swamped. Really expensive electricity. Do you know we have really expensive electricity? Okay, I'm going to ask that question in a minute. Everybody tells me we have renewable electricity. Well, we don't. So when we use electricity, we're using carbon. I'm going to show you those numbers in a minute. But 75% of my work is psychology, so I'm trying to convince people to do this stuff. And training a workforce to do heat pumps and stuff like this. You can't answer this question, Charlie. You already got one right. Who leads the league in trade education in the United States? Who trains more people in the trades than anybody else?
Unions, train.
Not unions.
Manufacturers of systems?
Not manufacturers of
Amazon.
systems.
Training colleges.
What'd you say, Nancy?
Amazon.
Amazon doesn't train anybody. What? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. One at a time. What?
Exxon?
Exxon doesn't train anybody. Yeah?
The Army.
Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, thank you very much for your efforts. You win a box of Samoas. My friend Henry wanted to convert one of his buildings in Texas to heat pumps. And he went to every heat pump installer in all of Texas. Not one had a torque wrench. A torque wrench is something that you have to do to make sure that all the connections in the heat pump are tight and don't leak. And no one in the state of Texas owned a torque wrench. Zero. So Henry kept his gas boiler. I want to show you some buildings where I've done some work. This was an engineering building built in 1873. And many kids in this school, many adults in this area went to grade school in here because they converted it to a grade school and it became senior housing. Well, it had these crappy boilers and it had no insulation in the attic, none whatsoever. Well, it had some, but it looked like the New York City Ballet had like walked through and tossed it as they were walking through. There was no, so we air sealed the attic and we insulated it and we put new boilers in. We got 22% savings. That's kind of a home run. I'm so happy with the Auburn Housing Authority. This is a building where I did the energy audit and I helped with the retrofit, but these furnaces are, you architects in the room, you know that this design type is called early modern Eisenhower bomb shelter. And so these furnaces were so old that the maintenance crew spent the majority of their time manufacturing parts for the furnace that were no longer available. So we put new furnaces in, we put new hot water makers in, we put, the housing authority had money for roofs, but the HUD wouldn't let them spend the money until we went to HUD and said, look, if you let them spend the $400,000, we'll give them $4 million. And HUD was like, that sounds smart. But they were sitting on it for 8 months with no answer. The lighting and refrigerators were done in every apartment. The building is master metered for gas and electric. The building documented savings of 26.2% in heating usage, 54.8% reduction in hot water and stove usage. And because the apartments were in better shape, the word got out in the neighborhood, hey, these buildings are in good shape now. The vacancy rate went from 20% to 3%. This is cash flow. This is success. This is what you do. And I'm going to talk about financing in a minute. The head of the housing authority wrote me a 2-page thank you letter. Has anyone in this room ever gotten a 2-page thank you letter? I have. Great woman, too. No, woman. Guys can't think that well. This is an electrically heated building in Canandaigua, New York. Electric heated, individually metered, little old ladies. Canandaigua is by Rochester. And this, I don't want to castigate the owners of this building as being stupid or anything, but the Archdiocese of Western New York owns this building and thought it would be a really good idea to add air conditioners for little old ladies near Rochester, New York. And the air conditioners were installed by Mo, Larry, and Curly, so they leaked like mad. Well, they had these terrible hot water makers. And they had an old one like this that was dirty like this, and right next to it was the exact same one, except brand new. And the engineer for the Archdiocese of New York was standing behind me. And I accidentally said, "What stupid asshole put this in?" And he said, "That would be me." And I said, "You're 46 years old. You're a PE. You've got a brain in your head, and you're still doing replace with same? What is wrong with you?" So we put, that's 50% efficient. These are 94% efficient. The building saw a 46% reduction in gas usage in 1 month, because the only thing they use gas for is these hot water makers. We air sealed the apartments, we fixed the ventilation system, we gave them new refrigerators, we gave them lights, we gave them stuff like this. The average apartment energy usage reduced by 25%. And the little old ladies were super happy because these guys were coming into their apartments and tightening them up. And the guys are super happy, the crew people, because the little old ladies got word out that these guys are really nice, and they got cookies in every apartment they went in. This is what community is all about. Guess what this building is right now? Yeah, it's heat pump ready. We did it. We did it long before it was cool to do. This is the Syracuse Housing Authority. I went to school at Syracuse. The head of the Syracuse Housing Authority lived across the hall from me in Syracuse University. "Bill, how you doing?" He's like, "Who are you?" So anyway, housing authorities have meters all over the place, so they don't know what meters meet which buildings. So we did a detailed scope of work, and we got 23% reduction in heating usage and 26 to 41% reduction in hot water usage in the buildings. Big cash flow. These make big differences in buildings. Meanwhile, back in corporate America, I don't want to say who designed this building. It's a firm you've never heard of, but the firm is based in Cleveland, and they thought it would be a really good idea in Boston to build a glass house with brick, but have every apartment be like a loft. So these were loft houses and they were all electric, heat pump. This is how they were designed. This is an infrared picture of the wall. And the wall was so cold that when I put my hand on it, it came out red hot. Because the detail on, this is a brand new building. The detail on doing the insulation, very common, was terrible. The heat pump froze because it wasn't designed for Boston temperature. It wasn't a cold weather heat pump because at that time they didn't make cold weather heat pumps. So the heat pump automatically switched over to resistance heat, and tenants were paying $700 electric bills. Architects, engineers, contractors, all of them. Bunch of dumbasses. Here's this is the window, and the window, the construction, in some of the apartments, I saw no cold air, like right next to the walls were insulated really well. These apartments got so cold that they installed resistance electric heaters by all of the windows to keep people warm. This is what people do every day. Oh, and then there's government people that tell me, "Oh no, you have to do this." I took this picture of a Con Ed truck last year. This Con Ed truck says, "Switch to CFLs, it's a great idea." I got rid of my CFLs and put LEDs in 10 years ago. They didn't remove this from their truck yet. Saw my last coal boiler in 1986. I was walking through a building in the Bronx, it was in northern Manhattan, and we were gonna switch the boiler to oil, and the super begged me not to because he said Bessie, that was the name of his boiler, kept the building nice and warm and he didn't mind shoveling coal, and he was a skinny ass guy, strong as an ox, but he shoveled coal all the time. So of course. But if you looked around in the early 2000s, you see the ash cans outside, you know it's our school. A project manager for the New York City School Construction Authority admitted that, oh, we're still burning coal in New York. Not anymore, they're done with it finally. But I found that sign in the school, right around the corner from my house. Don't park here, because the coal truck's coming. This was the year 2000. This was only 24 years ago, okay? This is the same city that's telling me I gotta be electrified. This is Hunts Point. And that's the meat market and the Crasdale and the fish market and the vegetable market and the whole thing all over the place. And, you know, it uses a lot of energy. But this is the Hunts Point produce market. And right here are trucks parked 24 hours a day that are loading and unloading vegetables from these stands. They are diesel trucks that are idling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in Hunts Point. Now please note there's a lot of flat roofs there, and there's a lot more flat roofs. Could the city, because this is owned by the city, could the city have invested in solar on all of these roofs 40 years ago? So when these trucks pulled up, you just plugged them in and they shut the diesel off? You wonder why people around Hunts Point have among the highest rates of asthma, cancer, blah, blah, blah. This is part of it. Oh, and then there's wastewater recovery systems. Sewage treatment plants. They vent methane. They don't reuse it, they vent it, and they flare it. These buildings are owned by the city of New York. Could we recycle that methane and put it into a generator or a boiler that reuse that heat? Very, I mean, I'll give DEP credit. They have designs to do all this stuff. But instead of telling me I've got to put a heat pump in my 600 square foot apartment, why doesn't the city get their crap together and capture this methane? These are all the rules that are about local laws and what you have to do to save energy in your buildings. And I've gone to seminars that are sponsored by the city of New York, and all this money to do these seminars goes to one organization, just one, and they do very, very good training. And I went to that organization, one of their trainings the other day. I'm a guy. Just want to explain that to you if you didn't know that up front. And in the boys' room, there's a sign over the urinal. Wait, it says, please hold flush button down for 10 seconds. In the building that teaches me about energy efficiency. Okay, I'm going to start getting angrier now. And New York City tells me we got to crack down on the 150 coal and wood-fired pizzerias in the city. Yeah, mess with my pizza, but have 1,000 trucks idling on Hunts Point. Right. Let's all decarbonize. Okay? All that efficiency stuff I talked about, that's all decarbonization. That's heavy decarbonization. And it's inexpensive and cheap and effective. How much do we pay for electricity in New York City? How many think that says 10 cents a kilowatt hour? How many think 10? How many think 20? You think 20. How many think 25? How many think 18? That's 18. We've lost the number here. I gotta pull
Yeah,
this
the
up.
one is right there, right in between.
How many think 20 cents? None of you are voting yet. 25 cents? You're all cowards. None of you will vote. Cost at the bill.
Yeah, it's more, it's at least 20 per kilowatt.
That says 25.
Yeah, it's at least 25, it might be more now.
You all said earlier tonight you're all environmentalists except Charlie.
Are you including delivery and supply?
Yeah,
Together?
Oh, together.
yeah.
We're
So-
not together.
The cost of electricity. Most people don't know what supply and delivery is, okay?
But they're billed separately.
What?
You get like a.
They're not billed separately.
You've never,
line item.
I will give you I'll bet you $100 you've never read that beginning to end.
Right, what beginning to end, my looking.
Yeah.
We want to look at
I mean, maybe mine's different.
John's got a bill.
But I pay 18 cents per
Oh,
kilowatt.
yeah, John got one.
This is a graphic that Zoe and I put together 3 years ago to talk about the highest electric cost in the country. And this was 3 years ago, all over the country. Nope, 40 cents a kilowatt hour right now. Yeah, who said no? Who said no? Did you say no?
We were waiting.
What?
We were waiting for that number, that's why we didn't vote.
40 cents a kilowatt hour? Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous. I was in Minneapolis last week, and a friend of mine is a genius building scientist. How much do you pay for electricity? He said, 10 cents for standard electricity, and I charge my car, and I only pay 4 cents for it. I'm like, you're wrong. He wrote me back a week later, 20 cents and 10 cents. They have a lot of nukes, so nukes make things cheap. So NYSERDA says to me that gas prices range from $1.19 to $2.82 per therm for the last, since 2012. So for the last 12 years. And 1 therm of gas is 100,000 BTUs, so it's $1 to $3 per therm for 100,000 BTUs. So 1 kilowatt hour is 3,412 BTUs. So 1 kilowatt hour at 10, 20, 30, or 40 cents per kilowatt hour equals 100,000 BTUs. This would be the cost of gas if you convert to electric. $11.78 for gas at $40. That means your energy prices go up by a factor of almost 6, converting from gas to electric. But an elected official who's supporting a bill in favor of electricity conversion said on the radio the other day, your bills will go down. Like, how's that going to happen? I mean, I get it if we super insulate and do a whole bunch of other stuff, but I don't hear that efficiency talk from people when they talk about electrification. Do you have something to say?
That particular bill has, as part of the larger bill, the New York Heat Act, it does have a 6% cap of your, like, net income
I didn't hear
built
it.
into it. The New York Heat Act, that's what you're talking about,
The
right?
New York Heat Act has a 6% increase, but I don't know who's
No, income cap.
Right, but I don't know who's going to enforce that. You're going to send your
You
income to Con Ed and say you can't charge me more than this?
That's a good question about how they're gonna enforce it, but that's one of the provisions in the bill that they're fighting over now.
Energy from the plant to the plug, electricity, is 45% efficient. If it's hydroelectric, it's a little higher. If it's thermoelectric coal, it's a little higher. But from the plant to the plug, on average, 35 to 40% efficiency. So we're losing all that carbon. Oh, Andy, we don't use that much carbon. We've converted to renewables. Nope. Connecticut is 4% renewables.
Northeast is terrible.
4. Massachusetts is 21.6. Maine is 66%. Let's hear it for the maniacs. New Hampshire is 15%. New Jersey is 49%. 4%, I'm sorry.
Well, you skipped New York, go back to New York.
I'll get New York.
Oh,
Vermont is 100%. But Vermont is strange because they consider wood pellets renewable. And they have a lot of wood pellet. Wait,
Go back to New York.
I thought I did New York.
You skipped, you did a tenth of a second.
New York, 30%. Renewables,
Now do downstate New York,
71.
71% what?
Carbon.
Like 98%.
Well, the number that I got from Con Ed the other day was 71. The renewable generation across the Northeast, 14%. That's not me making up numbers. That's reported by each state to the U.S. Energy Information Administration in November 2023. Now, I'm not trying to paint, I go all over the country and people say to me, you're the guy that hates heat pumps. I don't hate heat pumps. I hate non-renewable electricity. And if we get renewable electricity, I'm all in favor of this stuff. But there's some other stuff I want to talk to you about. Nuclear, I've got a friend of mine in the audience that thinks nuclear is green. I don't think nuclear is green. It leaves a lot of poisons on the ground. It takes a long time to clean up after they're shut down. It dumps a lot of really high temperature water into nearby aquifers like the Hudson River. So I don't consider nuclear power green. I don't like that some environmentalists are calling it green because it isn't. But now I want to talk about money, because if I talk to a building owner and I say stuff like, I want to do this and that and the other thing, when I talk to a building owner, I say to them, the only green I want to talk to you about is this. That's all they listen about, because it's cash flow. That's all they do. And if they can't afford it, they're not going to do it. And the Morris County Housing Authority told me when I walked into their office today, we can't afford any of this stuff. And when we finished talking to him for a half an hour, the executive director said to us, I think we can afford to do this. Because we just talked money. I mean, we have a lot of grant money for it. I worked for a bank for 10 years, and loan officers cannot do fourth grade math. They cannot do it, period. I did a graduate level course in commercial loans many years ago at the NYU Stern School, very prestigious school. And the teacher in the class had been in the banking business for 40 years. And he said, when you're figuring out the cost of a loan, you have to figure out that the cost of energy is going to go up 5% a year, and you have to build that into your costs. And I raised my hand and I said, but what if as part of the refinancing the loan, you invest in energy efficiency or alternative energy and make the bill go down, maybe cut it by 10, 20, 30, or 40%. And in front of this room of potential MBAs, this professor said to me, that stuff doesn't work. That's not funny. It's the NYU Stern School. It's training future MBAs, the people that are negotiating this crap. This stuff doesn't work. And I gave him a couple examples, and he shouted me down. I walked up to a building in Rochester, New York, and I had a lot of money to give this building owner, and we were going to refinance the debt in the building and make it super efficient, and the loan officer said, the green guy's coming. And I met him at the door, and he folded his arms, and he said to me, I ain't doing any of that green shit. So I walked through the building with him. He needed to do toilet retrofits, low-flow shower heads, faucet aerators, and the super had to take a foam gun and air seal the holes in the basement of the building. And that would save 40%. About a $400 investment per apartment, and he would save $1,000 a year.
Per apartment?
Per apartment. That's good money. I think that's a 3-month payback, but I'm not sure. But when you talk to owners, Windows, 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 windows. I've had to say to owners, okay, you know when you have a 2-year-old kid and you say to them, you can't say giraffe for the next 2 hours. All they say is giraffe. You tell an owner he can't say windows, all he says is windows. Problem is, there's no financing packagers that put all this stuff together for commercial owners, for low-income buildings, for manufacturing. There's nobody that puts the whole package together and says, you guys are all taking pictures of these slides, we're going to post them on the website.
Good.
Wow. There's no financing packagers or experts anywhere that put this stuff together. The difference between a tax credit and a tax deduction, and whether it's a refundable deduction or not, or if it's a refundable tax credit. Anybody know what I'm talking about? A tax credit versus, Charlie, it's not fair. You know all this stuff. A tax credit versus a refundable tax credit. Anybody know? Nope. Filed your taxes yesterday. Hello. And everybody tells me DesireUSA.org is the best thing, and I went on DesireUSA.org. It used to be pretty good when there were only like 6 tax incentives. And I went on DesireUSA.org. I told them the building that I live in New York City, and they told me I should get a diesel oil conversion retrofit tax incentive. 3 years ago, I had a sophomore at Baruch College who had a degree in business look up all the tax incentives 3 days a week in a summer internship. She did a 72-page PowerPoint presentation that I printed into a book. I called up the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I said, hey, this book is available. This kid did really good work. Maybe you should take this and publish it, or like put it up on the website, or make a flow chart, have one of your consultants put this together into something real. No, it's okay, we've got it. This is all there. Quickly Google financing high performance buildings, and there's nothing that'll tell you how to package this stuff. And while we're talking about money, let's talk for a minute about water. There's a few people with bottles of water here. It takes as much water to produce that plastic bottle that's filled with water as the amount of water that's in it. We waste so much water. We think of water as, well, it costs about a penny a gallon, and it costs about a penny to heat. Okay. But when I look at 750 multifamily buildings across New York State that have central heat, and either heat with oil, that's the purple, 10 million, or gas, that's 8 million, their water bill is double. In the average multifamily building, the water bill is twice the gas or electric bill. And is anybody starting their sustainability efforts in buildings by, what's your water bill and can we cut it by 50%? No. You know why? Nobody looks. They don't consider that part of environmentalism. And they're wrong, because it gives the owner cash flow and it saves water. My friend, another woman, was a health and safety person and wanted to find out if health and safety in buildings was caused by chemicals or rat poison or anything like that. And she looked at thousands of units from the same Boston property management. Charlie, don't talk in my class. And if you look at water and sewer at the top, the low per apartment cost was 117, the mean was 516, the high was 977. This is a psychologist, and she walked the building and found that the high costs were due to an unnoticed water usage with an outside hose, running 24 hours a day. And she said to the super, hey man, maybe you should turn that hose off. Not an energy professional, just a person that opens their damn eyes and looks at stuff. Toilets really make me angry. We gave owners $250 a unit in the 90s to change their toilets. They bought the cheapest toilets that they could possibly find, and the toilets ended up not working really well, so everybody flushed their toilets twice, so the water usage went up. The average household flushes a toilet 4.1 times per person per day. That's on average. And the toilets leak at the flapper valve. So if you go flapperless or a power flush toilet, you save a whole lot more water. The maximum performance testing program, please look this up, MAP testing for toilets. These two guys, one of them's from Canada, one of them's from California, they're absolutely hilarious. They're the Abbott and Costello of funny presentations about water. They did a study and they found out that 45% of the off-the-shelf toilets tested failed to remove the minimum accepted solid material. And I've done an awful lot of research, and I don't want to go into it in detail, but let me just say that I'm 6'2" and I weigh over 200 pounds, and I know exactly how much material I exude. So to test these things. The performance range from 100 grams to 900 grams of material. The toilets didn't work. And if a toilet doesn't work, people flush them twice and 3 times. This wastes water. So these guys invented soy paste artificial poop and tested thousands of toilets. And now there's no... Toto's right there. No, we're here.
They're
We're here.
downstairs.
Toto's downstairs,
Yeah.
and the other toilet manufacturer, Kohler, is over there. Every one of their toilets is MAP tested. Every single one, because you can't sell a toilet anymore if it's not MAP tested. And it's got to move 1,000 grams. And it's got to flush in under a gallon. These guys tested it. In this little building, the owner sent snail mail around to all of the tenants and said, there's leaks in the building. Tell me where they are. And I said, they're at the toilet. I specified toilets for this building. Very simple, very inexpensive toilets. 1.1 gallon per flush, no flapper valve. The water use went down 40% in 1 month. 4-0. That's a 1.2 year payback. Water is money. It's also the environment, because it takes a lot of energy to get water to you. Shower heads are super, they really work. I went through the housing authority today. They have the most awful shower heads on the planet. It's like showering under a horse, and I don't want to say it any different than that. But you can get really good shower heads that are super cheap and do the job right. Bathroom sinks, I see in the average apartment I go into, the average bath sink has more gallons per minute than the average shower. Why does a bathroom sink need more than a half a gallon per minute? Brushing your teeth, shaving, washing your dainty under things. This is massive water waste. This is an apartment I went into in New York City where the water was pretty good, but the kitchen had really, really high flow rate that I didn't think was necessary. And I don't like it when I see water at 138.8 degrees at the tap, because 137 degree water burns human skin. And like a 3rd degree burn, see you in the hospital, you're getting sued. So I want to see water at around 115 to 120. By code, I have to deliver it at 120 unless it's a senior building, then I have to deliver it at 115. Here's almost the last part. I'm trying to decarbonize. Massachusetts weighed in the other day, and Paul Armand of the Massachusetts Department of Energy and Resources described business as usual decarbonization strategies focusing on EUI, which I've always hated because it's just a clump of energy and it doesn't tell you how much you're using for heat and how much you're using for hot water and how much you're using for lighting. EUI will fail because the industry can reduce EUI while not touching heating demand, and often uses the EUI reduction to actually increase the heating demand. So you can increase heating demand, lower your EUI, and increase your carbon. And now I am calling for energy audits under Local Law 97 to say, here's the energy efficiency retrofits, and here's the carbon retrofits, and here's the smartest way to blend them together. But no company does it because they just do the audits as cheap as humanly possible and make a 70-page document that an owner can't read. But the Department of Buildings can read it. This guy says, crush the heating demand. I've been banned from speaking in Massachusetts for 5 years because I said things like this. Now all of a sudden, they're listening. What about natural gas bans? Well, the Energy Institute at Haas, which is the University of California in Berkeley, said regulators can mandate and ban natural gas bills for new buildings. However, without additional policy and rate reform, California's high electrical prices mean that electrification mandates will rise costs for households. Who will get hurt the worst? Low-income people. And I showed you 40 cent a kilowatt hour electricity is almost $20 a therm gas. It's 6 times bigger. Nobody's given me answers to this, but everybody tells me it's all going to be renewable, it's going to be cheaper. Please adjust the message. When you're talking to people, Bill McKibben is one of the geniuses in our field. And he did a talk earlier this year on a radio program called The United States of Anxiety. He spoke for an hour about energy policy. He never said the word efficiency once. And I was appalled. NPR did a talk the other day about when they had invented fusion for the first time at UCal Berkeley. And everybody was all excited about it. And someone said, but if they put more government money into fusion, will they put less money into solar and renewables? And the host said, I don't know. And what the host should have said is, fusion has gotten more money for the Department of Energy for the last 40 years than solar and renewable by a factor of 50. We invest in solar, we invest in fusion, we invest in fission, we invest in oil, we invest in gas, but we don't put money into that other stuff. Don't get me started on what Fox News says. And Science Friday is this great talk on it. It's this great science program on NPR. It's on Friday mornings and Friday afternoons in New York City. And I kind of like it because they explain science kind of quickly and efficiently. And they talked about retrofitting buildings, and they talked about this building in Montana, and a policy person from Southern California, and the host, and an energy guy that I know from Montana was actually in on the call. And they never said the word efficiency. They never said insulate the walls. They never said air seal the attic. But they did say take the furnace out that's old and change it to a heat pump. This is the electricity mix in Montana. It's coal. So they just told this person to increase their carbon output by a factor of 5. And this is everywhere. Change the message. We're all environmentalists and we want to reduce energy use. When we do this, we reduce carbon. The most environmental way to do this is through efficiency. What my original mentor told me. Wouldn't it be better if we reduce the load of the building first and then put the solar in? And I was at a green home event about 5 years ago, and afterwards we were having cocktails like we're gonna polish off the beer that's here tonight and chit chat, and 2 kids came up to me. And they said, oh, we understand that you're a mentor type of guy and you help people. And I'm like, yeah, what? What do you want to do? And they said, we want to put solar on buildings in Brooklyn. And I said, wouldn't it be a better idea if we reduced the load in the building first and made the buildings more efficient so solar would pick up more of the load? And these kids said, that's genius. You're so smart. And I thought to myself, finally, I've grabbed the lightsaber from Obi-Wan. I'm smarter than my pal Bill Bobenhausen, who was one of my first mentors and put up with my shit, and I was a very difficult human being, believe me. And my phone rang 2 hours later, and it was a friend of mine. They said, "Did you hear Bill Bobenhausen died tonight?" The night I grabbed the lightsaber, he passed away. And I told that story at his funeral. We don't have enough mentors. You don't have enough mentors. And you need people to guide you in doing things right, because a lot of you are doing things wrong. We've forgotten what we used to call the negawatt, efficiency. And none of this means that we're opposed to decarbonization. And if anybody tells you, "Oh yeah, I know that Andy Padian guy, he hates heat pumps," just tell them, no, he likes logic. He likes efficiency. He likes decarbonization. And he's all in favor of doing this stuff in the right order. 2 environmentalists are walking along the beach, and they see all of these starfish washed up on the beach. And the one environmentalist freaks out. "Oh my God, all of these starfish, what are we going to do? They're all going to die." And the one environmentalist leans down and grabs one of the starfish and flicks it into the water and says, "That guy's happy. I'm doing things one starfish at a time." I did it today in the Morris County Housing Authority. And these people are going to have much better buildings, all on efficiency. And we might be able to electrify the buildings, I'm not sure. But don't forget about the starfish, one at a time. If you want to learn more of this stuff, there's this huge conference that's happening in Saratoga Springs, beginning of next month. And I'll put this back up in a minute so you can all take a picture of it. But it's going to be all of these presenters, and they're going to tell you a lot about multifamily energy efficiency. And I'll put this back up in a minute. Thank you. You guys started 15 minutes late, and I'm 7 minutes early finishing, so I gotta say, I rose to the occasion. Questions? You want to walk up so everyone can hear your question, because you're sitting all the way in the back.
What is the impact in water usage with flushing if you go from a flushometer, like in a pre-war building, to a low flow?
Flushometers, I don't know as much about flushometers as I do about tank toilets, but flushometers can be adjusted to use significantly less water, and they're still fairly effective. So a flushometer is different from a tank. Most of us have tank toilets.
Okay.
I won't bite anybody. I know I'm angry, but you gotta ask questions. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why you've, or what do you think the reason is for building owners being so bullish on window replacements?
Do you watch TV?
No, actually not really, but.
Okay. Building owners do. And they still read newspapers, electronic or not. And they get, if you go to a builder's show or an owner's show, the window guys are up there. And they're all saying 40% savings. And owners know that. I have gone to co-op boards and I have been shouted down because doctors that are on a co-op board know more about energy efficiency in buildings. I don't tell them how to operate on me, but they tell me how to operate on buildings.
So are you comparing it to, like, if there's a technology that's from like the 90s that's a double glazed window, there's, in the building that I live in, they're saying, oh, we need to change the windows to be more energy efficient, and you're suggesting that the delta is not enough, really?
Your windows probably cover about 20 to 30% of the exterior of the building, which means that the building probably leaks through the walls a lot more than it does through the windows. And if we make the walls operate more efficiently by air sealing them or adding insulation to them, either on the inside or the outside, and that's a difficult thing to do, and air seal and insulate the roof, which typically isn't air sealed and insulated, and do it right without putting those fans on the top to suck all the heat out of the building, then it works. but windows are still an insignificant part of the exterior of the building. And so unless you go from an R2 window, which is what most wood and double pane metal windows are, and go to an R13, which is a triple pane fiberglass window, you're not going to pull off big savings. But you're not going to get a payback on the fiberglass window because we just priced them today in this housing authority. They're $1,000 a pop. 1,000. Yes, sir.
Sort of the same way you have these rules of thumb on what are going to be the best efficiency improvements, do you have the same on the rebates, or they're kind of like a handful that you're always going after, tax credits or deductions or similar?
You're asking me about like what I should do in every building?
Or are there some that come up more frequently that are sort of the kind of the
Typically, it's the controls that run the building. That's why when it's 52 degrees outside, you walk around and count the open windows. That building has a control problem. There's insulation problems, there's air sealing problems. Multifamily buildings leak horrifically. Small family buildings leak horrifically. So it's holes and controls is a big piece of it. But everything else is different in every building. And it's like saying to me right now, there's somebody over at NYU over here that's been sitting in the emergency room for 5 hours, and he just fell off the chair in the emergency room. Can you tell me what's wrong with him? I haven't seen the patient, so I can't make a diagnosis. But I went out to Dover, New Jersey today to see these buildings because a guy that I know that's a nice enough guy had some ideas, but he wanted to be reassured. And we reassured him, and we had a good time. There's a really good Chinese restaurant there and a really good ice cream place. So we had good Chinese food and good ice cream. But that was our payment for today. I'm going to get them in the back, and I'm going to get you. Go.
Yeah, sure. Just wondering why you think there's not a greater focus in either New York State legislation, federal legislation to look at these holes and controls, putting potentially rebates or money towards that if we know that's the bulk of
The most efficient and best operating efficiency program in the United States, as far as I can see, is the Weatherization Assistance Program. And they help low-income buildings and low-income people all across the United States. And boy, those people are smart. And single-handedly, they've reduced the cost of insulation, air sealing, blower doors, infrared cameras, because they create a high demand, and they're really, really good at it. But they are under $500 million program for all 50 states, and nuclear gets 10 times that, 10 or 20 times that. So it's really hard for a nonprofit organization that's fixing buildings and running to get them done to stop and do a commercial and say, we did this great thing. So guys like me try to go around the country and talk about this stuff, and there was a big conference in Minnesota last week, and 2,000 people were there that primarily do weatherization, and it was a revival meeting. We all talked to Jesus, except we didn't talk to Jesus directly. But, and we talked about, how to get the word out. It's hard when you're a program that's this big, and you're doing stuff that's this big. And I wish that the city, state, and federal government would occasionally say efficiency, because I hear the elected officials, and they never use the word. Never. And I've got dozens of examples, and it makes me angry. I don't know if you know that. You had a question.
Yes, I'm fascinated by kind of the way you establish trust with these building owners. Like you said, they cross their arms, they're not excited to see you when you walk up, but by the end, you're their best friend. You're telling them about all this money saving. And I understand you said the importance of talking about money, but
That's all building owners care about.
Too.
What's the cash flow?
It's just as you increase the cash flow, they trust you more and more.
Yeah.
But how do they know you're telling the truth?
I can give them 10 examples
Okay.
of buildings. I can give them the thank you letter from the,
Yeah.
from
Sure.
the Auburn Housing Authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how would you recommend doing that in, say, like a co-op where we don't pay for our water, we don't pay for our gas bills, right? There's so much that we're not, as individual units, incentivized to.
Co-op or condo?
Co-op.
you need to get on the co-op board.
No, there's gotta be enough.
You see? If you don't join the team, you can't solve the problem. Okay? I've met all of them. Let me explain something to you that one of my mentors told me years ago. New York City cooperative apartment is a contradiction in terms. Okay? Right. So you've got to go to the energy committee because you have one. Can I see the energy bills for the building for the last 2 years? Find out how you're doing. Is there a D on your front door? Wow.
Well, no, we just got up to C by 1 point.
Right. Guess what? You're going to be paying a $97,000 fee every year. And your local law 97, how many apartments in your building?
Oh, like 1,000.
You're going to be paying a $400,000 fee every year because your building doesn't care about it. So there needs to be an uprising because you have to deal with it. And every building that I've seen that's a D, I can make an A in about an hour and a half without a full-blown energy audit. But I can look at their local law 97 audit and I can say, these dumb bastards that did this audit, they need to redo it and answer these questions. Because they don't do it for the building. They do it to get paid and get out.
It's the incentive, really.
What's that?
It's the incentive that they have to just do it cheap and, or if there's something
Owners
else.
bid on the low bid contract.
Yeah.
Always.
But it's follow the money, and if you're saying that in 90 minutes you can turn a $400,000 bill into maybe a few $1,000s.
I didn't say a few thousand.
Okay.
I can reduce usage in most buildings by 40% with a 4-hour walkthrough. I was at these buildings in 100 units. They're in Morris Plains, New Jersey, technically. I think we can cut their fuel bill by 40%, and we saw it, easy. And the guy from the local weatherization program said, that's what I thought, but you guys proved it to me. Okay, yeah.
You're just one guy. You're, throwing the starfish in. Are there other companies that do what you do that you can recommend to people?
There's a dozen companies in New York City that do really good work. There's 70 weatherization agencies in New York State that do really good work. They're doing mostly low-income work, but I've been encouraging them over the years to get a little private work in and charge people a lot of money to fix stuff. And it's pretty easy, isn't it, Gal?
Yes.
Gal, isn't it pretty easy? Yeah. Gal works for a really good company called the Association for Energy Affordability, and they fix all kinds of buildings. Yeah, you had a question, sir?
Yeah, I just had a question in terms of how are we going to teach the new generation of builders, contractors, when there's so much discouragement from the government to not really diving deep into more renewable energy or solar or green energy?
I've been doing trainings across the United States for the last 30 years. I do 5-day trainings, I do 10-day trainings. Green Home NYC made $17,000 20 years ago on training that I did and donated the money to Green Home NYC. We used to do it more and more and more and more and more, and we don't do enough of it, and nobody does enough of it. But you know what? You wouldn't sit for 5 days. You'd be bored because it wouldn't be a YouTube video that takes 70 seconds. It's 40 hours of class, and it's math, and it's science, and you have to understand it, and everybody thinks, oh, this is just, I can learn this from, a video. There's obviously a video professional that knows how to do this stuff, and they don't. It's science, it's math, it's physics. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician, and I'm not a physicist, but tie those things together and it kind of works, yeah?
So how do you end up doing this kind of work?
Word
How
mouth.
does one get into it?
You gotta start from the bottom and go out in the field and learn stuff every day. You can't. The only building science classes I know are out of McGill University and University of Toronto. The Canadians are very good at this. But I don't know any, this isn't university stuff. You're gonna find out that the boiler guy that comes and fixes the boiler in a 50-unit building knows more about science than you do and can really fix stuff. You're gonna find out that the insulation guy knows an awful lot about insulation. And there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of old books on the subject matter, but they haven't been converted to the interweb. Do you have a question, Greg?
Yes,
You're
so
doing
sort
this.
of related thing. I was waiting for you to finish, but related to that. So it actually even sounds like, and I reflect on this with some of that, like tradespeople tend to be some of like the people, the ways that people get into this sort of thing. It's what it's sounding like, because I see that in solar a lot, like people that are roofers, people that are electricians, that are like familiar with the working on those buildings and things already. It's like almost like easy transition in a way. Not to say that that's the way you'd recommend, but
The
would you
best
agree?
energy auditors I've ever met are firemen, because firemen understand where smoke goes through a building. And where smoke goes, hot air rises. Now, there's nothing stopping, Green Home from doing a class for, 100 people at a clip, not on Zoom. You can't do this on Zoom. You gotta be live and in color. You gotta talk to people. Gotta get there. Like, I've looked at everybody's face tonight, and I know who thinks I'm a complete friggin' idiot, and I know who thinks I'm an annoying old man, and I'm all of those things.
Couldn't agree with you more.
Right.
Because we saw what happened when we weren't having these in-person encounters and activities, right? And it just changed, and once we started doing in-person, after that little bug we had, right? And let's face it, we all had to, adjust through that, but we just saw this great connection happening again. And it isn't, the other technology is great as a default to things, but when you're getting this enthusiasm and this passion and then connecting, and he's absolutely right, you're connecting to the faces in this room, there's a whole different energy taking place. So,
Three kids from NYU. I met one of them at a conference in Boston, and she came up to me and she said, "We're doing our graduate thesis on this." I'm like, "Great." She's like, "I really appreciated your presentation," because I did a version of this presentation in Boston at a big conference. And she said, "Will you look at our graduate thesis?" I'm like, "Sure." So she said, "Could you meet with us?" I'm like, "Yeah." She said, "Okay, we'll have a Zoom meeting." I'm like, "I won't meet with you on Zoom. If I can't meet with you live and in color, I don't want to meet with you." And a building owner told me this the other day when I did a presentation about building owners. Say, a building owner won't talk to you unless you meet with them live and in color. And they're like, "We don't want to talk to owners. They're all a bunch of And the only owner in the room came up to me after and shook my hand and he said, "You're absolutely correct. I won't talk to someone unless they come to my office and talk to me." You had a question?
Yeah, thanks. You made a great point about like money, being the main primary motivation and like the payback period, etc. Are there any great tools online that can help an owner, just get started and like plug in some numbers?
Nope.
Okay.
And I begged NYSERDA to do it. I begged the city of New York to do it. And you call anybody up in these government entities and they say, "Have you considered electrification?" And they don't say, "How much energy does your building use?" And when this EUI thing came out and local law, whatever, I begged the mayor's office, please don't do it this way because owners won't understand it. Give them something in very easy terms. And when I was working in the bank, I was talking about BTUs per square foot per heating degree day, and Jim helped with this extensively, but one of our bankers was sitting in the room, and he said, "If you say BTUs per square foot per heating degree day to me one more time, I'm going to punch you in the face." He said, "Just make it like a report card. My kid brings a report card home, I know what an A through F is." And we designed this system where we did local law 84, but also gave owners an A through F grade for their common area electric use, heating use, hot water use, water use, so they could see where to focus their money. And we were told by the city of New York to stop doing that because it was too confusing and everybody wanted EUI, and no energy use index is what that stands for. And I don't know if a building has a 94.2 what it is. I don't have any idea. I have to tear the buildings apart, I have to look at them, I have to do 4th grade math, and it takes me about an hour to do 20 to 100 unit building, but home run, really quick. And we're not focusing on the pigs, and we're not focusing on where the usage is the biggest. I'm going to give you all a break because it is exactly 8:12, and you started 12 minutes late, so I went 12 minutes over. I really appreciate the questions tonight. I really appreciate you showing up. I wish we had 200 people here because I'd like to get the word out to more people. Go back and finish the beer and finish this. We'll all stick around and talk. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.